Hi, in this video let's discuss the next set of questions starting with protocol for publication of a scientific paper or a research article. So usually if you refer any article in PubMed, you'll have introduction first. You'll have abstract and followed by you'll have the article details like introduction in which aims and objectives will be explained. After introduction there will be materials and methods, a mention on materials and methods, and then results, discussion followed by conclusion, right? So I guess you had the same question. So this will be the sequence of a scientific paper in literature, or even when you're planning to do a study. This is a protocol we follow usually, right? So to publish a scientific research paper, what is the sequence of presentation? Introduction, which includes aims and objectives, followed by materials and methods, results, discussion, conclusion, and finally acknowledgement. Now, moving on to the next topic, Parkinsonian drug, which is associated with peripheral vasospasm. So, you have few drugs, ergoline-derived drugs, especially ergoline-derived dopamine agonists like bromocriptine, carbergolin, and pergolide. So these are some of the category of drugs which can cause pulmonary and retroperitoneal fibrosis and other ergot adverse effects such as digital vasospasm and erythromelalgia. Erythromelalgia is nothing but a rare condition which primarily affects feet and occasionally hands as well. So usual extremities are affected, which is characterized by intense burning pain of affected extremities with rise in temperature and severe redness, erythema, right? So hence it's called as erythromelalgia. So ergoline derived dopamine agonists are associated with digital vasospasm, right? So that's another topic which I wanted to highlight. Now coming to the third one, Flumazenil. So where is it used and why do you use it? So usually in overdoses with benzodiazepines. In benzodiazepine overdose we go for this drug, Flumazenil. So Flumazenil is an antidote for benzodiazepine toxicity. It's a specific benzodiazepine antagonist useful in reversing the sedation and respiratory depression that often occur when benzodiazepines are administered to patients undergoing anesthesia or when patients have taken an intentional benzodiazepine overdose, right? So Flumazenil is an antidote for benzodiazepine toxicity. Now there was a question on which of the following instrument is an excavator. So if you look into Sturtevant's, you have clearly a classification mentioned with excavators being further subdivided into ordinary hatchets, hoes, angle formers, and spoons. So if you review the literature, hand instruments are used in dental operatory are categorized as cutting and non-cutting instruments. Cutting instruments include excavators, chisels, etc. Non-cutting includes amalgam condensers or mouth mirror, explorer or probe. Excavators are further divided into ordinary hatchet, hoes, angle formers, and spoons. Chisels are primarily used for cutting enamel and may be further subdivided into straight chisels, curved chisels, binangle chisels, enamel hatchets, and gingival marginal trimmers. So excavators, they are ordinary hatchets, hoes, angle formers, and spoons. All of these are categorized under excavators, right? Moving on to the next topic, there is a case-based question. A 40-year-old female patient complains of pain on cheek which triggers on chewing food, and in between she has no pain. Diagnosis is trigeminal neuralgia, spinopalatal neuralgia, glossopharyngeal neuralgia, giant cell arthritis. So when I reviewed literature, so it's conclusive that it's trigeminal neuralgia. I'll tell you why. So if you look into arthritis, temporal arthritis, so usually it is seen in the age group of 55 to 80 years. And the onset may be slow, insidious, and there is usually throbbing type of pain, headache or burning type of pain, and there is generalized malaise. The pain frequently may be localized first in teeth, TMJ, scalp, and occiput. But there has been no mention about trigger zones in temporal arthritis. And if you look into glossopharyngeal neuralgia, In glossopharyngeal neuralgia, usually the trigger zones are located in posterior oropharynx or tonsillar fossa. These zones are difficult to localize but can be found by careful probing. So we can even rule out this option. And if you look into alarm clock, headache or spinopalatal ganglion neuralgia, it's clearly mentioned that there is no trigger zone. But in the question, it's mentioned that on eating something, there is pain. And in other situations there is no pain. So there is no trigger zone in case of spinopalatal neuralgia, as we discussed previously in one of the discussion videos. And if you look into trigeminal neuralgia, there can be any trigger zone located all over the face depending upon the branch involved. And it's also clearly mentioned that the patient learns to avoid, okay, we'll start from the trigger zones. The trigger zones which precipitate an attack when touched are common on vermilion border of lips, the aloe of nose, cheeks and around the eyes. Usually any given patient manifests only a single trigger zone. The patient learns to avoid touching the skin over the trigger area and frequently goes unwashed or unshaven to forestall any possible triggering of an attack. In some cases, it is not necessary that the skin actually be touched to initiate the painful seizure, right? And exposure to a strong breeze, it's not that only on touching there will be triggering, but even exposure to strong breeze or simple act of eating or smiling has been known to precipitate trigeminal neuralgia. So from this it's conclusive that the most probable answer would be trigeminal neuralgia. A 40-year-old female patient complains of pain on cheek which triggers on chewing food, and in between she has no pain. So diagnosis is trigeminal neuralgia as per the options which I have now, right? Now there is also an image based question on spot welder, so you can look into the image now. So spot welder, these are used in dental laboratories to repair various dental treatments and repair or heat orthodontic materials through electrosoldering, spot welding and heat treating. They may also be used for wire annealing. A spot welder may feature a Y-shaped handle for vertical clearance for large appliances. A variety of power settings should be available along with manual control and hands-free operation. A spot welder usually comes standard with a copper electrode and a carbon soldering tip. An array of additional electrodes may be purchased separately. So this is some information given pertaining to spot welder in one of the commercial websites. So spot welders, they are mainly used for repairing various dental treatments, including annealing of wires, right? Now moving on to the next topic, witch's chin. Have you seen a witch, at least in movies? So witch's chin, it's like you'll have characteristic features as you can see in the image. Witch's chin is an unpleasant aesthetic defect characterized by ptosis of premental tissue with deep submental fold, which may be exaggerated by hyperprojection of mandible. You might have seen witches in Harry Potter as well, if I'm not wrong. So these three elements, right, ptosis of premental tissue, deep submental fold and hyperprojection of mandible, these three are characteristically seen in case of witch's chin. So these three elements determine the different degrees of deformity. Therefore the ideal treatment should be directed to one, two or all three of them, right? We're not going in detail pertaining to surgical corrections of witch's chin, but witch's chin is about these three elements as you can clearly see in the image, right? Now moving on to the next topic. I had these keywords, mixed dentition period, which treatment do we go for? Preventive orthodontics or interceptive orthodontics. So if you go by the definition of interceptive orthodontics, it is something which is initiated after setting of malocclusion, isn't it? And one best example which I can give you is serial extraction. So when you go for serial extraction, usually in mixed dentition period, right? So mixed dentition period, usually we based on the circumstances, we go for interceptive orthodontics. Let me know if at all there are any keywords or any additional options pertaining to this question. We'll update in the description part of the video. Now moving on to the penultimate topic, potentially malignant lesion among the following options: erythroplakia, lichen planus, OSMF, syphilitic glossitis. So was the question potentially malignant, or is it potentially malignant among all except? Because all of them are potentially malignant except lichen planus. In lichen planus there are no malignant transformational changes. But erythroplakia, OSMF, syphilitic glossitis, there can be malignant potential. So if you look into the literature, Schaeffer's erythroplakia, so in contrast to leukoplakia, erythroplakia is almost always associated with pre-malignant changes histologically and is therefore the most important precancerous lesion. And if you look into OSMF is also a precancerous condition, a generalized pathologic state of oral mucosa associated with a significantly increased risk of cancer. And if you look into syphilitic glossitis, so syphilitic glossitis, as you can see in the image, the surface of tongue gets broken up by fissures due to atrophy and fibrosis of tongue musculature, and hyperkeratosis frequently follows. Syphilitic glossitis is almost exclusively found in males, and the predilection of syphilitic glossitis to undergo carcinomatous transformation has been recognized for many years, and the incidence of such malignant transformation has been as high as 30% in various reported series, right? And in lichen planus, there is no malignant transformation as mentioned in Schaeffer's, isn't it? So just review the question once again and get back for any further assistance. Now moving on to the final topic, three-walled defect, vertical defects are most commonly found in which of the following teeth? So if you look into Karan's, it's clearly mentioned that the three-walled vertical defect, originally called as intrabony defect, appears most frequently on the mesial aspects of second and third maxillary and mandibular molars, right? So these vertical or angular defects are those that occur in an oblique direction, leaving a hollowed out trough in the bone alongside the root. The base of the defect is located apical to the surrounding bone. In most instances, angular defects have accompanying infrabony pockets. Such pockets always have an underlying angular defect. So vertical defects increase with age. Approximately 60% of persons with interdental angular defects have only a single defect. Vertical defects detected radiographically have been reported to appear most commonly on the distal surfaces and mesial surfaces. However, three-walled defects are most frequently found on mesial surfaces of upper and lower molars, as we discussed just now. Right? So these are some of the topics which I wanted to highlight in this specific video. As I said, if at all there is any addition pertaining to the question or options, do let me know. We'll update the particular question in the description part of the respective discussion videos. I hope it's clear.